The gym didn't try to hide what it was. Every corner of Titan Vale was designed to impress or intimidate with polished black tiles, neon slogans screaming grit, and rows of spotless mats glowing yellow under stage lights. The playlist thumped low and heavy, blending with the sound of snapping belts and shouted cues. The regulars fit the image perfectly. Broad-shouldered finance bros with cauliflower ears, tech guys in personalized GIs, influencers posing in between rounds. Cameras clicked more than fists hit the mat, and every gesture carried a look-at-me confidence that bordered on performance art. Then she walked in. No bang, no drama, just the quiet swoosh of a glass door closing behind her and the soft whisper of sandals on tile. Her presence wasn't loud, but it stopped something. Even the music seemed to dull for a second, like it wasn't sure if it should keep playing. She wore white, clean and crisp, but with no logos, no badges. A black belt was folded under one arm, not yet tied, and a canvas bag hung loose at her side. Her face was unreadable calm in a way that felt both soft and completely sure. Nobody knew who she was, but a few already knew what she wasn't. Not one of them. Not branded. Not brash. And as she stepped toward the mat and bowed with perfect form, nobody could explain why they were still watching her. Only that they were. Part 1. Character Intro. Claire, the quiet fighter. Claire didn't move like someone trying to be seen. Her steps were quiet, steady, not timid, but precise, like every footfall had a purpose. She didn't hesitate or scan the room for approval. Her bag was canvas old but cared for. One strap was slightly frayed at the edges, the kind of wear that comes from use, not neglect. The crisp white GI she wore stood out for its simplicity, free of any badge or name. Her hair was pulled back into a neat braid, low and clean, not for show, but for function. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, no distractions. Even the way she bowed felt effortless, like something done 1,000 times, but never once for applause. Most people at Titan Vale tried to dominate the room with presence. Claire shifted the air just by being still. She took her seat at the edge of the mat with legs folded, spine straight, and hands relaxed on her knees. The others watched her like a curiosity. Someone whispered about her being a white belt. Someone else joked that she must be someone's girlfriend just tagging along. Claire didn't flinch, didn't even glance their way. It wasn't passivity. It was control. The kind that didn't need to prove itself by pushing back. She absorbed everything around her, not in defense, but in quiet awareness. There was something about her silence that wasn't empty. It was full. Not guarded, but measured. Not lost, but settled. Her face didn't offer much to read. No challenge, no insecurity, no fear. Just that steady gaze and a calm that almost dared people to underestimate her. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt fragile. It felt earned. The kind that made noise look insecure. Claire never tried to match the room. She anchored herself instead, let the noise move around her like wind past stone. Even the instructors noticed. One of them paused mid-sentence when he saw her sitting there. Another kept glancing at her like trying to figure out what wasn't quite adding up. No one said it out loud, but some part of the room already knew. She didn't fit in because she wasn't meant to. Not to follow. Not yet revealed, but undeniably present. Claire had stepped into the room with nothing loud to offer, and still something in the air had changed. Part 2. Setting the stage. Where power was a performance. Titan Vale didn't pretend to be humble. Its walls were lined with motivational quotes in bold black letters, all about dominance, drive, and destruction. The logo glowed in gold above a matte black stage where visiting instructors gave flashy demos for social media. Even the mats were curated. Yellow and sharp, edged in jet black with overhead lights positioned to make everything look dramatic. Music pumped through the speakers like it belonged in a nightclub, not a training space. Everyone on the floor looked like they were dressed for a sponsored shoot. Their GIs were customized, stitched with academy patches and digital tags. Some had QR codes on their sleeves that linked straight to highlight reels. Warm-ups weren't quiet. Every stretch, every slap on the mat came with noise, not just from movement but from commentary. A show for anyone watching. The crowd was mostly men, most of them already used to being watched. You could tell from the way they moved wide and relaxed, like the room had already accepted their place in it. They weren't training for survival. They were performing. For cameras, for status, for one another. Some talked while sparring, explaining their own moves as if narrating tutorials mid-roll. Others stopped mid-grapple to correct posture, not for technique but for angles. There was no space for quiet, no space for stillness. What didn't shout got ignored. So, when Claire sat down on the edge of the mat without announcing herself, she became a question no one wanted to ask. A wrinkle in the flow. At first they made jokes to smooth it over. A white belt wandered in, somebody's girlfriend trying to be cute. A TikTok yoga tourist who got lost. One of the brown belts nudged his friend and muttered about how she'd last 5 minutes, maybe less. Another pulled out his phone, grinning, already preparing a clip for later. To them, she was the kind of story that ended in embarrassment. She didn't wear their brands. She didn't scan the room. She didn't laugh. The head coach Kaido noticed her and decided to make it fun. His GI had red trim, rare and loud, setting him apart from the rest. His tone carried more showmanship than authority. He called her out from across the mat, voice raised just enough to pull everyone's attention. He asked if she was looking for a yoga class. The room laughed on cue. Claire didn't respond with a smile, just a soft answer, steady and plain. She said she was observing. That answer only encouraged him. He walked over, scanned her outfit, and cracked a joke about cosplay. The room laughed again, louder now, like a crowd that wanted to make sure she got the message. He offered her a chance to help with a demo. It was framed like generosity but smelled like setup. Nobody objected. She didn't either. When Claire took off her gi and accepted the dojo's guest white belt, people didn't see humility. They saw proof. Phones tilted toward her like predators tracking movement. Someone whispered a hashtag idea. Another said this was going to be viral gold. She became the joke before even stepping onto the mat, and she let them write the punchline first. Not because she didn't care, but because she understood that no one there was listening yet. In a place where power meant volume, Claire brought something unfamiliar. She brought silence, and no one knew what to do with it. Let me know when you're ready for Part 3. Subpart 3.1, Demo Doll. The humiliation begins. Kaido clapped once, loud and sharp, like calling for attention before a show. He smiled toward Claire and called her forward. His tone was friendly, but the kind that carried a smirk underneath. She stood without hesitation and walked to the mat. She moved with the same quiet, calm bowing before stepping in. But this time the room was ready to laugh before she even touched the floor. Kaido gestured toward her GI and pointed at the belt folded on her bag. "It doesn't count here," he said loud enough for the back row to hear. He handed her a dojo-issued white belt, still stiff and creased, from the shelf. Claire didn't argue. She took it, tied it neatly around her waist, and stood waiting. Around her, snickers turned to open chuckles. Marco stepped forward with the confidence of someone already writing the punchline. He cracked his knuckles, adjusted his belt, and bowed lazily. His black GI was embroidered top to bottom like a travel scrapbook of past wins. He looked at the crowd, not her. He winked at someone filming and stretched like he was warming up for a joke. Claire bowed in return with form so precise it made his posture look sloppy. But no one noticed that. They were watching for the fall. The match began. Marco let her grab his sleeve and collar for a second before sweeping her legs and slamming her to the mat. The impact made a dull thud. Phones caught the moment with perfect timing. He stood and raised his arms like he'd just won a tournament. The crowd erupted in laughter. She got up without a word. No complaint, no hesitation. Just reset her stance and waited. Marco gave her space, then let her try a pass. He even lifted his leg, mocking encouragement. The moment she moved, he countered and flipped her again. This time louder, messier. Her body hit hard, hair loosening around her face. A student on the edge of the mat mimicked the fall and rolled onto his back in exaggerated slow motion. Another wave of laughter followed. "She hasn't landed a thing," someone whispered. Another voice agreed, said she didn't even know how. Claire stood again, breathed steady, reset. Marco tossed in a flashy throw, next one meant for camera angles. She hit the mat but rolled out and recovered in tight defense. It was the first time he blinked, just for a second. Then he smiled like nothing had changed. He strutted around the mat, arms loose, shaking out his limbs. He was still performing, still sure of the script. Kaido played along. He narrated like a ring announcer, praising Marco's control and reminding everyone that patience was key. But Claire wasn't being patient. She was studying. Her grip changed slightly. Her feet repositioned after each reset. The crowd didn't see it, not yet, but Marco started to. He threw her again, added a backward roll for flair, bowing at the end like wrapping up a scene. He leaned down beside her and said just loud enough to be picked up, "This wasn't a place for hobbyists." Claire brushed the hair from her face, bowed once, then sat upright again, ready. The crowd clapped for Marco. Phones glowed with captions being typed in real time, some already preparing to post the wipeout highlight. No one looked at Claire. Not really. She remained kneeling, hands on thighs, posture calm. The borrowed GI sagged off her shoulders and the white belt hung loose at the knot. 30 minutes passed like that. Marco basked. Kaido spoke. The room kept watching him. But Claire didn't fade. She didn't wince. She didn't ask to leave. And still no one wondered why she hadn't broken. Not yet. Let me know when you're ready for Sub Part 3.2. Sub Part 3.2. She doesn't push back, but she doesn't break. Claire hit the mat again. Not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to echo. She rolled out and rose to her knees without shifting expression. Marco reset with a grin, cracking his neck like the match was just sport. He let her approach again, playful, careless. But Claire didn't flinch or rush. She gripped his sleeve again, slower this time. When he swept her legs, she allowed it, absorbing the fall without stiffening. She didn't resist, but she didn't scramble either. She moved like someone waiting for something, not an opening, a rhythm. Marco stood over her with showy confidence, letting the camera catch his profile. But Claire was already seated, spine straight, eyes forward. A few students near the back began to quiet. Not fully, not obviously, just enough to notice something had shifted. Claire's breath was even. Her hair had slipped from the braid hanging loose at the temples, but she didn't touch it. She didn't adjust her belt. She didn't wipe sweat. Every time she stood, it looked easier. Not because Marco was getting sloppy, but because she wasn't carrying effort anymore. The instructors kept watching Marco. They cheered him on like a favored son, but their eyes occasionally drifted, just briefly. Claire's hands moved differently now. Her fingers closed with more intention. Her balance looked more precise. She wasn't fighting. She was reading. Marco launched into a throw with flair. Claire took it, but this time she spun through it, landed tighter, and reset faster. Someone near the mat blinked. She shouldn't have landed like that. Marco smirked, but looked over his shoulder longer than before. Not to show off. To check who was watching. Claire's next entry was cleaner. She reached for a grip, baited, and let it go. Marco countered, but her body turned with the pressure. He was beginning to sweat now. His timing was still sharp, but her stillness made it look jittery. She wasn't just quiet anymore. She was calm in a way that unsettled him. Kaido shouted encouragement from the side. He told Marco to pick up the pace, make it look clean for the demo. Marco nodded but stopped looking at the cameras. He started looking at her. Claire absorbed another throw. This one came with noise, more drama. But when she stood this time, she didn't rise stiffly. She rolled out of it and landed light on her knees. A student on the bench leaned forward. He didn't know why yet, but something was off. Claire's movements weren't slowing. They were sharpening. Every reset became cleaner. Every step back onto the mat more balanced. She didn't adjust to him. She adjusted to the space between them. Marco tried another flashy sweep. It landed barely. Claire slipped underneath and used the fall to coil into a defensive shape. Now he looked confused. Not afraid, not yet, but less sure. Claire sat again, posture upright. Not closed off, not guarded, just completely unbothered. She didn't challenge him. She didn't perform. But she didn't fade either. One of the blue belts leaned toward a friend and whispered something. The friend shrugged but didn't laugh this time. Claire took another throw. This time her foot placement was intentional before she fell. Her shoulders hit the mat, but her hips rolled first. It was clean, too clean for chance. Marco shook out his arms, pacing a bit wider now. He looked down at her, waiting for some kind of weakness. She gave him none. She blinked slow, watched him breathe, and still she stood again. By now a few phones had stopped recording, not because they weren't interested, but because they were no longer sure what they were filming. Something was happening, and no one could quite name it yet. She wasn't breaking, she wasn't pushing back, but she was building something, and they were just starting to feel it. Let me know when you're ready for Part 4, Inner Strength, where she'd really been. Part 4, Inner Strength, where she'd really been. Before she disappeared from the circuit, Claire was the name they whispered at weigh-ins. She wasn't loud, didn't trash talk, didn't pose on podiums, but she won clean and fast with a style that looked simple until you tried to stop it. Her last tournament had been in São Paulo. She won every match without giving up a point. Her final opponent tapped in less than 30 seconds. After the medal ceremony, when the crowd had thinned and the cameras packed away, her coach handed her a new belt. He didn't give a speech. He just said, "Not for medals, for how you move when no one watches." She bowed. She folded the belt and tucked it into her bag. The call came that night. Her younger sister had collapsed at the clinic. The diagnosis arrived fast, and so did the decision. Claire withdrew from the season before it even began. No statement, no post. She just left. For 2 years, she trained in different ways, learning to navigate wheelchairs, oxygen tanks, emergency rooms. Her hands, once known for grip strength, now steadied plastic cups and buttoned hospital gowns. She never called it sacrifice. She never felt like she'd walked away from something. She just turned toward what mattered more. Some nights after her sister fell asleep, she'd sit on the floor with her GI folded in her lap. She'd press it to her face, remembering the scent of eucalyptus and padded mats. Not missing the crowd, just the quiet rhythm of movement. After her sister passed, the apartment turned quiet in a different way. Time moved slowly. The GI stayed in the closet untouched. The belt sat coiled in the bottom drawer. Months passed before she picked it up again. Not for competition, not for anyone watching, just to see if her body still remembered. It did. She didn't go back to her old team. She didn't contact her coach. She flew west to a city where no one knew her name. She didn't want to reclaim anything. She just wanted to feel the floor again. The dojo near the hospital her sister had stayed in was always on her route. She'd passed it a dozen times before walking in. She didn't ask for a class or an instructor. She just wanted to bow and kneel, to hear the silence between drills. She hadn't expected anyone to notice, but maybe some part of her had hoped someone would. Not because she wanted recognition, but because silence carries weight, and hers came from someplace deeper than most people knew. Let me know when you're ready to continue with Subpart 5.1, The Sweep, When the Room Fell Silent. Subpart 5.1, The Sweep, When the Room Fell Silent. Marco circled her like the match was still a formality. He cracked his neck, threw a look toward the cameras, and dropped low like he was about to finish with a flourish. His pace quickened, not because he was threatened, but because he wanted to end it before the silence grew louder. Claire moved slowly, her hands adjusted once then again, calm and exact. She looked at his base, not his face. Marco lunged for her collar, and that's when her hips shifted. The movement was subtle, almost lazy, but her right leg slid under his thigh, her left foot pressed against his knee, and in one clean breath she cut through his balance. The scissor sweep landed like it had been waiting. Marco hit the mat hard, all limbs and noise, the sound louder than any throw he'd landed on her. No one clapped. No one laughed. Claire moved into mount before he finished scrambling, her knees locked into place with weight that knew exactly where to settle. Marco bridged violently. She didn't flinch. He twisted toward her hip. Her hips shifted just enough to meet him. The crowd was frozen now. Phones that had been raised were stuck mid-air, forgotten. Claire didn't rush. She flowed. She let his panic guide him and used it like water rolling downhill. He tried to elbow escape. She let him move just far enough to expose his side. Her leg threaded under his arm. Her weight followed. In one seamless slide, she took side control. Someone at the edge of the mat whispered something. It didn't travel far. Nobody needed to repeat it. Marco tried again, more desperate now. His hands flailed for grips. Claire's breathing never changed. Kaido stood with his mouth slightly open. He had a cue ready, but the words didn't land. Marco turned. That was all she needed. Her back take came fast, clean, technical. Hooks in, one arm across the collar. She didn't crank. She restricted. It wasn't power. It was presence. Marco froze. His face twisted. His hand tapped 3 times. Fast. Loud. She released the second she felt it. He slumped to the mat, chest heaving. Claire sat back on her heels, bowed once, then stood slowly. The room didn't react. Not out of politeness, out of disbelief. Marco lay still, eyes low, hands resting flat against the mat. Claire didn't gloat. She didn't speak. She just walked to the edge of the mat and folded the borrowed GI. She tied her original belt around her waist. Smooth. Exact. Kaido still hadn't moved. No one had resumed sparring. It felt like something holy had just happened. Not flashy, not loud, just real. And for the first time all day, the mat was quiet. Let me know when you're ready for Subpart 5.2. Her name was Claire. The truth revealed. Subpart 5.2. Her name was Claire. The truth revealed. Claire stepped off the mat without looking back. She folded the oversized GI she had borrowed and placed it neatly beside her canvas bag. Then she slid into her own and tied her black belt with quiet precision. No one said a word. Marco was still sitting where she'd left him, shoulders low, eyes fixed on nothing. Kaido hadn't moved from his spot either. The playlist that had thumped so confidently all morning was still paused. No one remembered when it had stopped. No one dared to restart it. In the far corner, one of the students scrolled through his phone. His thumb hovered above a paused video clip from the match. Then he opened a browser tab and typed in a name he'd heard someone whisper. Claire J. Moreno. The search loaded fast. A tournament bracket, a video highlight reel, a photo of her on the podium, barefoot, medal draped around her neck. A coral belt stood next to her, presenting a new belt in front of a half-empty gym. No lights, no music, just history. Another student leaned over, read the same page, and blinked. The words on the screen didn't match what they'd just seen, but somehow they did. Someone else muttered her title under their breath. Gracie Cup Champion. The name moved like a quiet ripple. Not loud enough to echo, but no one needed it to. On a different floor, an administrator at the affiliate office reviewed routine credentials. One red alert blinked on the screen. It said, Guest Black Belt, Unlisted Lineage Match Flagged. He clicked. A match file opened labeled with Claire's initials. Video metadata from a Sao Paulo academy confirmed its origin. A certified signature from her former coach sealed the bottom of the page. A secondary warning appeared. Visitor rank exceeds registered head instructor. The system froze Kaido's instructor credential and filed a request for regional review. No one had submitted anything manually. The system recognized the conflict on its own. Back on the mat, someone watched the replay in slow motion. They pointed at Claire's hand position during the sweep, then traced her hip shift with a red circle. Another student nodded and whispered something that sounded like instruction, not opinion. Kaido finally spoke. His voice was quieter now. He said her style was niche, old school, not practical anymore. No one agreed. No one argued either. They just didn't answer. Marco still hadn't stood. He pulled at the edges of his sleeve like he was trying to find something to hold on to. His earlier swagger had drained from the room completely. Near the whiteboard, the daily rotation list was still visible. Kaido's name at the top, bold and black. Marco's name halfway down, now smudged from someone's shoulder brushing past. A new line had been added in faint pencil. Visiting advisor, Claire J. Moreno. It wasn't underlined or boxed. It didn't need to be. A newer white belt, maybe 16, asked why she hadn't been introduced. No one had an answer. Claire didn't wait for one. She adjusted the strap on her bag and walked toward the exit. No applause followed her. No one dared try. The door closed with the same quiet grace she'd brought in with her. Outside, the sky had shifted from morning glare to muted light. A breeze tugged at the edge of her guy. She reached down, tucked it in, and kept walking. Behind her, the room stayed still. Not in shame. In recognition. She hadn't spoken a word of her history. She didn't need to. The mat had said everything for her. Claire didn't look back. The mat was behind her, the door closed softly, and the city moved around her like it always had. Cars passed. A bus rumbled by. But inside her, something was still. Her bag hung over one shoulder. The GI inside folded neatly, belt still tied around its center. Her breath came steady. Her steps didn't rush. Back at Titan Vale, no one rolled. The playlist hadn't restarted. The students stood in clusters, eyes flicking between their phones and the mat like they didn't know what came next. Someone wiped the whiteboard. Kaido's name stayed at the top, but the assistant list had changed. Underneath the old names, one had been added in pencil. Advisor, Claire J. Moreno. No one said who wrote it. No one erased it. By the gear rack, the screen that once played highlight reels now looped the final sweep in slow motion. Each frame marked angles, traced, hands circled. A blue belt watched with his arms crossed and whispered something about bass and breath. The clip had already been uploaded, this time not as a joke. It had been tagged instructional, level advanced. Marco didn't spar that night. He sat by the wall folding G's into piles without being asked. He moved slowly, hands deliberate, as if trying to get something right again. A young woman walked in near closing. White belt, borrowed GI, nervous eyes. She stood near the edge, unsure where to go. No one laughed. No one nudged anyone. A quiet brown belt walked over, helped her tie her belt, then pointed toward the water station. That was it, nothing loud, just a shift. 2 blocks away, Claire paused outside a small community center. Through the glass, a kid's Jiu-Jitsu class was running warm-ups. The instructor clapped along with their effort. The room was filled with sound, but it was a different kind. She smiled softly. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered. Not worn out, just real. On the sidewalk at her feet, a paper flyer had blown loose. She caught it with one hand before it slipped past the bench. It was creased at the corners, printed in black ink. Women's Self-Defense, Sundays, 10 a.m. She looked at it for a moment, folded it once, and slid it into her bag. She didn't decide anything right then. She didn't need to. Somewhere between the sidewalk and the sunset, the weight she carried didn't feel heavy. It just felt honest. Her power had never been about noise. It had always been in how she moved, how she showed up, how she never needed to explain. And now someone had made space for that on the board. Not big, not bold, but written clearly enough for everyone to see. And this time nobody erased it. Let me know if you'd like a compiled version of all parts into a single full story.